Hello everyone, welcome back. It's Amethyst Rune Witch here, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the various different types of witches. Now, there are a lot, so this will be a two-parter at least. So there'll be a second part next week. But today I wanted to talk about the main types of witches. So these are the, like the ones where you don't get into the nitty grittiness of the craft or your personal craft. Some of it can be a little bit more specific, but there are elements of it that are more general, as it were. So let's get into it, shall we? So the first one I'm going to talk about is the traditional witch, which is also called the folk witch. Now, this is a witch who practices magic from the ancestors, but can also base their practice on their geographical local area. So, for example, I live in the Midlands of the UK, so I could base my craft, if I wanted to, on the Celtic people. We used to have Celts in the area. Queen Boudica is semi-local, but she's one of the most famous of Celts. Everyone knows about her. Well, here in the UK anyway. So, a traditional witch can be quite historical. Now, I love my history, but this is it's getting more of a feel of the history of the area and the ancestors of the area. And it's likely that a traditional witch is someone who practices. I'm just struggling with my S's today. A traditional witch is likely to use magical practices and beliefs that predate Wicca, which we are all technically pronouncing wrong. It's an old English term that's actually supposed to be pronounced Witcher. If it's got an A on the end, I think it was male. If it's got an E on the end, there are slightly different pronunciations. Witcher and Witcher. Witcher sort of thing. Old English for witch. So there's a history with the Witcher stuff. The traditional witch is also likely to have recipes for charms, spells, talismans, herbal brews, but specifically local sort of things. As a result of the geographical local area, they're also likely to be more knowledgeable on the land spirits and customs and folklore of the area. Folklore, folk witch. And because of this, they will blend the old beliefs and practices with modern tools and ideas. So it actually does go hand in hand and meshes quite well. Next, we've got the Green Witch. I am trying to cultivate my green witchery. Years ago, there would have likely been a solitary practitioner and performing simple domestic tasks that were infused with magical intentions. So pretty much everything they did had an intention behind it, a specific intention. The Green Craft, which is influenced by rural customs and folk magic, similar to the traditional folk witch, but it's also about the green world, the natural world, plants. You know, when you think of green witches, you think green thumbs. I currently don't think I have green thumbs, but I'm trying. And so because of their interest in and their interaction with the natural world, they would have had a lot of herbal magic, with knowledge, like growing, foraging. They'd have done experiments with the plants and recorded their results in notebooks and such to, document their findings. They were literally scientists without, being what we now call scientists in today's day and age. It's very similar to being a kitchen witch, green witchery, because it focuses on the hearth and the home as the centre of their practice and as the place of sanctuary. So for me, my living room would be my hearth. Not always the kitchen. Nowadays it's not the kitchen that's necessarily the hearth of the home, because of course, a couple of 100 years ago we wouldn't, unless you were particularly rich, you wouldn't have had a separate room for a kitchen. Your kitchen would have been in the living room. So yeah, a little bit of history there. Next I'm going to talk about the Gardnerian or Alexandrian witch, although this borders slightly on Wicca. I'm going to continue calling it that because everyone calls it that. Traditionally, a Gardnerian or Alexandrian witch can trace their heritage back for generations, but there is a point to make, because not all witches are Wiccan. I've had this experience where I said I was a witch to someone and they immediately went, "Oh, you're Wiccan." No, there's a difference. There was a small difference, but it's different. It tends to be a very British form of earthbound traditions, and any initiated members into the Gardnerian or Alexandrian ways, because there are the two, Alexandrian and Gardnerian, initiated members are sworn to secrecy. So unless it's like, that club, unless you're in it, the rules are you don't talk about it. The Gardnerian tradition can be traced back to Gerald Gardner, who was the founder of modern Wicca in the 1950s. Alexandrian can be traced back to Alex Sanders, who was actually one of Gerald Gardner's early initiates, and Alex Sanders founded his practice in the 1960s. Alexandrian Wiccan, I'm going to call it that, is a blend of ceremonial magic, I'll get to that in a moment, with Gardnerian influences. So it's sort of a bit of a mix. But mixing's good. Mixing is always good. Sorry. Next you've got, come back to this one because that's a good end one. Next I'll talk about the kitchen witch. So as I said with the green witch, the kitchen is traditionally the heart of the home and the perfect place to make magic. It's where meal prep becomes a magical activity. So it's not just making a meal, throwing whatever in together, grabbing, a bit of this, a bit of that, putting it together. It's actually making that meal with intention from the very start. So, you can get specific ingredients. Like you can get recipes. Find a recipe, look up the associations for the different ingredients. For example, bread. Bread's a good one. Flour is a grain. It's made from grains, obviously, and is very good for abundance and prosperity. Sorry, got the hiccups, don't know why. And with that, say for example you're making a traditional milk bread, if you add milk, milk is associated with nurturing, caring, and that being looked after sense. So really, if you make a milk bread, for example, you'd be mixing those ingredients together. I know there's sugar in it as well, yeast, but they'd all come together to form an item of food that would nurture, give abundance, and prosperity. And that's something that could be shared by the entire family. So you've got that sharing. So you're not just asking for it for one person, say yourself. You're asking for those things for everyone, and you're sharing that sense to invite more of that back to you. A kitchen witch is likely to have a stove or countertop altar, specific, for their craft, so they have like a set area. They're also likely to have fresh herbs in jars or pots. I am paying a little bit more attention to my kitchen witchery. Not really doing anything much, and I do have herbs in jars, but they're not fresh. At least I don't think any of them are. One of them might be. My mint might be. I could be wrong though. Could be wrong. But again, as with the example with the milk bread, magical practices are incorporated into recipes and cooking. Preparing meals from scratch makes it a sacred work. And then the work and energy that gets put into making that meal is appreciated and shared with the sharing of food. There is a changing attitude towards food prep and the eating of said food, where magic can be crafted at the stove, oven, and the cutting board. So it's almost like we're sort of returning to thinking of food as being more of a magical item. Now, I did mention with the... Sorry, I move on quite quickly. So sorry. I did mention in the Gardnerian Alexandrian Wiccan, it can be sort of ceremonial magic. Now, a ceremonial witch is a witch who uses ceremonial or high magic and specific rituals or invocations to call on spirits, deities, whoever, whatever. But they don't tend to do it as open. It's quite a secret society. Any outside information is very limited because there's a lot of secrecy within the communities that do practice the ceremonial magic. It tends to be based on older occult teachings like the Kabbalah, the Enochian, or the Thelema. And a lot of people who practice ceremonial magic don't even identify as witches, which is fine. You don't have to call yourself a witch if you don't want to. It's one of those things. A hereditary witch is the next one, and this can sometimes cause a little bit of an issue, because when you think hereditary, it's passed down through the generations, and with that being passed down through the generations, some people just lump hereditary witch, some people altogether, saying that, oh, you can, thinking that they, a hereditary witch goes around and saying to people, I'm a hereditary witch, my family have been doing it for generations, so I'm better than you are because I can trace it back. But it shouldn't detract from anyone else who may not have been born into a line of witches from becoming a part of the witchy community. You know, it's there is divides within this, but again, with hereditary, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's biologically inherited. It's normally little small family traditions with beliefs and rituals that have been handed down through the generations. It rarely includes outsiders, even if you marry into the family. So, you know, there's no guarantees that you'll get through. It's very hard to know how many hereditary witches there are in the world, because the info is kept within the family and isn't shared. Family tradition tends to be based on beliefs and practices, not always through genetic links, as some people can think. A hereditary witch has to be born into witchcraft, but there is a choice about whether or not to practice the actual craft itself. So there is that as a bit of a difference. I'm not entirely sure that I don't think I'm a hereditary witch. I don't know, purely because I can't ask family. I don't talk to family, but that's okay. It's fine. I'm okay with not being hereditary witch. And if ever I have kids and they walk down the path, I'm not going to label them hereditary witch. That's for them to choose. If they want to follow a similar path to mine, that's fine. But if they don't want to, it's up to them. It's their choice, their life, their decision. Anyway, let's move on to a slightly nicer, much nicer type of witchcraft, which is the eclectic. It's a term that applies to traditions and beliefs that don't fit into a specific category, because it can be a blend of beliefs and practices. So, for example, I'm a bit of an eclectic. I borrow from variety. I don't really have any set ideas and things. An eclectic witch is likely to use traditions that resonate with them most. They can use traditional sources, they can read online, they can learn from classes, but also from their own personal experience. So I think I'm definitely an eclectic. I've got a wide range of things. An eclectic witch is either someone who has followed a specific tradition for a while and then modified it to fit their own practice, or it's someone who's not initiated and doing their own version. So I'm definitely an eclectic. I'm definitely an eclectic. Working on my Green Witch, sort of maybe going down the folk witch path, but sort of maybe not. Definitely not Wiccan. I want to work on my kitchen witch. I'm not really a ceremonial witch, although, to be fair, I don't really do an awful lot of spells and rituals. Although I'm getting more into that. I'm getting more into doing rituals, though. So I'm definitely, for this video, I'm definitely an eclectic witch. I'd love to know in the comments what you guys might identify as out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that I've done today. There'll be lots more in next week's video. So I hope you all stay safe and merry meet.